Is this the year that sky-high valuations of AI startups come down to earth? Tom Davenport and Randy Bean think so, and they've been right about these things before. These data experts were right about the overheated hype around Agentic AI in 2025. And in this video, they're back with 5 predictions for 2026, based on their new article for MIT Sloan Management Review. They'll tell us why most GenAI projects aren't delivering value, what's up with AI factories, and what the smartest companies are doing to get ahead. Let's get into it.
Last year, our kind of most prominent prediction was on agentic AI. We were not alone in that regard. We said that it was hyped and would be hyped even further, and boy, were we right about that, at least. I think it's probably fair to say that we expected agentic AI to take off a little faster than it has. So our first prediction is that it's still with us. It won't be quite as hyped this year, and it's going to take a while to really become effective. What we found out through a number of experiments with agentic AI over the past year is that it makes a fair amount of mistakes. There were various experiments to have it run a store, which it didn't do very well, do common business transactions, which it made a lot of mistakes in doing. So that's a bit of a problem. 2, it hallucinates because it uses generative AI. That's just one source of the mistakes. 3, it seems to be relatively easy for hackers to really hack into an agentic AI system, typically using something called prompt injection, although there's some other approaches too. Given all of those issues, I think a lot of organizations were conservative in actually adopting agentic AI. That conservatism, I think, will continue over the next year. Companies will continue to have some human in the loop to check things. And since, taking humans out of the loop was one of the big potential productivity advantages of agentic AI, I think that has also slowed the adoption. But there actually have been some predictions that agentic AI won't really solve all of these problems for a decade or so. We're not quite that negative. I think we would predict pretty widespread adoption within 5 years. We promise that next year we will not talk about agentic AI and say that it will come in 4 years or so.
Our second trend is the AI bubble will deflate and the economy will suffer. Let's parse that out a little bit. I'm not an economist, nor am I a fund manager either. But one of the things that's clear is that there's inflated expectations, and we can expect those expectations to modify. One of the perspectives that Tom and I have is that we've lived through this before. We lived through the internet rise and then the decline of the internet bubble. And one of the things that's important to understand in all of this is that in the Fortune 1000, 90% of the Fortune 1000 companies are legacy companies. They don't have to compete with the move fast and break things crowd. They don't have to compete with the AI-driven or AI-initiated companies. They just need to compete against the other 90%. So they tend to transform and adopt new technologies at a slower pace. Just 5 years ago, during the pandemic, the chief digital officer of the nation's largest insurance company said to me, Randy, we've done more to execute on our digital transformation strategy in the past 6 months than we did in the previous 20 years. And that's because they had to survive during the pandemic when they needed to interact with their customers, but couldn't do it in person. So what I encourage organizations to do is to take the long view and to think about what the impact is going to be in their organizations in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, even over the next 25 years in terms of what are you trying to accomplish? How can you leverage AI to accomplish that? And overall, our perspective, and it's known as Amra's Law, is that often technologies are overestimated in the short term, but their transformational impact is very much underestimated in the long term.
So what do you think, Randy? Do you think we need another pandemic to speed the adoption of AI?
There's all kinds of unexpected events that can occur. Hemingway had the line, it happened gradually and then suddenly. And that's often how transformational events in history have happened.
One of the reasons why we think this bubble is likely to deflate a bit is because organizations haven't really gotten as much measurable value from AI as would justify the valuations of these vendors. And I think one of the major reasons why we haven't is that most organizations have taken more of an individual level approach to generative AI in particular. They've said, here, try this out on your blog post or speed up your emails with it. And they haven't really thought carefully about that individuals or the entire organization's workflows and processes. As a result, the kind of benefits that you get are a minute saved here, a minute saved there, very difficult to aggregate and turn into any quantifiable form of value. On the other hand, I think if organizations were more enterprise-oriented in their use of generative AI, they would be more successful in creating value. The enterprise ones where you're working on how you do new product development or customer relationships or something like that are much harder to do, and they typically take longer and cost more, but they do typically provide measurable value. There have been a number of organizations, Johnson & Johnson is one, that said, we tried 900 different individual use cases. We didn't get a whole lot of value out of them. Instead, we're doing about 9 enterprise use cases that are much more strategic for us and much more likely to yield value. So I think we're going to see more of a shift toward enterprise-oriented approaches over the next year.
The next trend in our survey is that data and AI management are institutionalized, but org structure issues remain. Let me break this down a little bit and speak first about the institutional aspect. One of the things that have been doing for, this will actually be the 15th year, is conduct an executive survey of Fortune 1000 data analytics and AI leaders. And let me share some of the findings in terms of institutionalization of AI and data leadership roles. Back when the survey was first conducted in 2012, only 12% of organizations had appointed a chief data officer. It was only in 2017 that that number increased over 50%, and this year it was 90%. So clearly the role is well established. But even more important, just in 2023, only 35% found that the role was successful within their organization, and this year that number had doubled to 70%. So again, a reinforcement that this data and AI leadership is here to stay. In addition, 93% of organizations said that the focus on AI has led to a greater prioritization and investment in data within their organizations. So clearly there's a recognition that great AI depends upon reliable data. And in addition to that, organizations are moving into an innovation role in terms of their data and AI leadership. In 2020, only 54% of those survey participants said that they were focused on innovation and offensive activities as opposed to regulatory and compliance activities. This year it was 85%. So again, data and AI are being used to innovate and transform the businesses. And interestingly enough, this year, 38% of organizations said that they had appointed a chief AI officer now, in addition to the chief data officer roles. Where the challenges lie for many of these organizations are where do these roles report? That continues to be all over the place. This year, in terms of where the chief data officer reports, 27% said it reported into business leadership, 34% said it reported into technology leadership, and 9% said it reported into transformation leadership. Tom and I wrote recently about perhaps we could resolve this issue by appointing a unified chief data analytics and AI officer would report into the business leadership of the organization. Would add that a few companies now have positioned this role within the operating committee. At JP Morgan, their chief data analytics and AI officer is part of the 14-person operating committee, reporting to Jamie Dimon in that organization. So as AI gains in prominence, it's being elevated into a C-suite role.
A trend that we are seeing that is accelerating, we think it'll accelerate even more in 2026, is the creation of these AI factories. This is not really a building generally or just a technology platform, but it's a capability that includes a set of tools that the organization is comfortable with, some data that could be reused, maybe even some language models that have been tailored to the organization that can be broadly applied, and a set of methods and processes for developing AI, along with all the necessary, ethical and governance issues. This had been done earlier in some large banks. Randy mentioned JP Morgan Chase. They did this a few years ago. BBVA, the Spanish bank, was early on in this regard in Europe. But now we see the trend penetrating into other kinds of industries. And we actually recently wrote one of our AI in action pieces in Sloan Management Review about Procter & Gamble, which has adopted an AI factory, and they are able to cut down the time quite considerably to develop use cases and put them into deployment. We had previously written an AI in action column about Intuit around tax time because of TurboTax, and they have developed a similar kind of capability, although they refer to it as GenOS, a generative AI operating system for the entire organization to use, and a lot of people have adopted it. This, I think, is one of the issues that organizations have had with AI. They haven't put enough use cases into production deployment, and you don't get economic value in that case. I think AI factories will help to solve that problem. Not sure if it will happen quickly enough to prevent the bursting or deflation of the AI bubble, but it will certainly help if organizations can create value with this impressive new technology.
And the AI factories are very distinct from the AI data centers, Tom?
Yes, it's not just putting up a big data center and filling it full of GPU chips. It's a capability within an organization, not typically from a vendor, that involves methods, tools, processes, et cetera, for building AI successfully.
To recap, Agentic AI isn't ready yet. The AI bubble will likely deflate, and organizations that treat GenAI as an enterprise resource rather than just an individual productivity tool will be the ones that actually see returns. To learn more, read the full article, 5 Trends in AI and Data Science for 2026, at the link in the description. For more from our authors, check out this playlist. And let us know in the comments which AI trends you think will have the biggest impact this year.